My problem is now your problem. My best friend does park maintenance / habitat restoration in an urban park. She finds all sorts of wild stuff, including drugs, drug paraphernalia, and occasionally hypodermic needles. There used to be a city task force that would come collect them, but it was discontinued. My friend would pick them up and dispose of them as safely as possible to reduce risk for park users. Eventually, she decided to ask the building manager, not her supervisor, but the person in charge of the facilities for the building she works out of, to install a sharps container in the bathroom, which park users have access to. He refused on the grounds that it would encourage drug use. Counter-arguments to the point were unsuccessful, as was pointing out that not having a sharps container endangered her and the custodians who took out the trash. So, she started bringing the needles to him whenever she found one, and asking him to dispose of them. It only took about 5 needles before he installed a sharps container in the bathroom.
Now to the comments. That's how you stick it to him.
I think he got the point.
Don't be a prick. As someone who has had to do various injections while away from home, every public bathroom should have a sharps container, especially restaurants and places like parks where someone eats or spends a lot of time at. For those that use insulin, most people will just put the cap back on and throw it in their container when they get home, but sometimes you lose it and now you're carrying around an unprotected needle, and homeless people need a place to dispose of their needles. They're inexpensive and you won't need to replace it often unless you're a high traffic area like an airport or major park. Tip for anyone that loses their cap: put the needle in an empty plastic bottle, preferably a rigid one.
Recapping: the needle is also the #1 way to accidentally stick yourself, and is generally discouraged, which is just another argument in favor of the sharps bins.
I've also had a needle go into a cap funky and stab out the side, and now it's more awful than ever. Numerous, conveniently located sharps containers for all. Please and thank you. For some people, the only way to get them to understand that something is a real problem is to make it _their _real problem. This applies in so many contexts.
My boss refers to it as flick the booger at them.
He's right. Most people are apes. I'm comfy, got my banana, not helping you. A booger in the face is exactly what they need. Wouldn't want to encourage insulin use.
OP replied. Right? Exactly.
Diabetics be danged. I work in urban parks myself. Not sure where this is located, but for my municipality, sharps containers in bathrooms ended up not working well. We still try, but they end up being destroyed and needles stolen. My boss even installed a heavy-duty one encased in a thick cage, didn't matter, still destroyed.
OP replied. Sad. But thanks for sharing. In this case, the building is a community center with front desk staff rather than an unattended park bathroom. They haven't had any issues so far.
That makes sense. Our city has a huge issue and we deal more with unattended restrooms, so yeah, a lot of fun. It doesn't encourage drug use, it encourages safe disposal of drugs. If people are going to shoot up in a park bathroom, they're going to do it no matter what. Might as well make it safer. Afterthought, also safer for anyone who is diabetic or needs regular shots.
Nobody is like, hey, I wasn't going to shoot up today, but they installed a new sharps bin in the park that I really want to try out.
Diabetic. Not on insulin now, but I was during all 3 pregnancies. It is always great to see sharps containers in public restrooms. It never occurred to me to use heroin instead of insulin. Maybe I should have tried.
An ex's cat was diabetic, we broke up so no idea how to cat is doing now. Before we got a sharps container, we heard we could put the needles in an empty 2-liter soda bottle and bring that to a pharmacy. The look of sheer terror on the pharmacist's face on seeing said bottle said otherwise.
The 2-liter bottles are too thin to be safe, unfortunately. I would put mine into milk jugs because they have thicker plastic, but then they stopped accepting those too. Hi there. I'm a community health worker and I primarily work with 4 drug users and have lots of experience with harm reduction and needle disposal. Here are some really important tips if you ever come across a needle. Never try to recap a needle that is not your own. If you see a syringe, assume that it still contains a needle. Assume that all needles are contaminated. If you get stuck, pricked, by a needle, call your doctor or go to urgent care ASAP. You will want to start preventive medication as soon as possible, because the sooner you start it the more effective it will be. Never put a needle in the recycling or loose in a trash can, because someone else could get stuck by it. And on that note, here is how to safely dispose of a needle. Never pick up a needle with your bare hands, ever. Also assume that any needle you see is contaminated. Instead, pick up needles with a pair of tongs. You can get tongs that are specifically made for trash/litter pickup, but you can also use a normal pair of kitchen tongs just as well. Before you pick up a needle, identify a container that you will put it into. A sharps container is best, but if you don't have one you can use another thick, heavy-duty plastic container that can be capped. Something like an old laundry detergent bottle, not thin plastic like a milk jug. Never use a can, thin plastic that can be punctured, or a glass container, it could shatter. Open up the container before you pick up the needle, and also it's best to label your DIY sharps container with something like needles or sharps do not recycle. Gently use the tongs to place the needle into the container. Place the needle with the sharp end facing down into the container first. Do not fill the container all the way, you don't want there to be any needles close to your hand when you screw the cap on. Tightly cap your container. Dispose of your container. In some states you can dispose of it in the trash, not recycling, but it's best to look this up first. If you can't dispose of it in the trash, you can see where your local sharps disposal program is.
I used to be a busser. A diabetic had done his injection and left the needle on the table. I refused to bus that table. The waiter scoffed and was like, you have gloves on. Yeah, plastic food service gloves. The guy had diabetes, but he could also have a contagious disease, and I'm a bit paranoid about not sticking myself with a used needle.
You were 100% in the right. Also, screw that customer and the waiter while we're at it. I'm gonna say this one time, with large letters, so those in the back can read it. 2. Hashtag harm reduction and mitigation for a society does not, and never has, increased negative individual behavior. If you want less people doing drugs in that area, open free clinics nearby. Treat it as the disease it is. You have an outbreak. Get healthcare workers there to help treat the disease. If you don't have that level of control and can't get the government to act, you mitigate the harm to everyone else as best you can. Thank you, OP, for dealing with this sensibly and directly. Tell your manager if he wants less drug use, to use some of his power to push for a couple nurses from a free clinic to hang out on occasion and hand out literature that'll be left there, and just to answer questions. Save one life, save the world entire. You get one person killing themselves into a program and you've done more good for this world than most have in their lifetime.
Exactly this. Drug use is gonna happen, no matter what, especially around beaches and parks since they also attract homeless people. Needle exchanges and sharps containers, if used, will just provide a safer environment for everyone.
So, he got the point.
Put all the puns in the bag.
Is this a stick up? What kind of mind duckery is that? That's like saying installing trash cans will encourage littering.
Same thought process where if we teach sex education, they will have sex.
I know I'm never teaching my children how to swim, wouldn't want them to drown. Sharp idea. The building manager is a prick. Harm reduction does not equal encouragement. I inject chemo every week. Got a Sharps container for free directly from Sharps, come in a special box with instructions on how to pack it up safely and send it back to them, for free. Then they send you a new one for free. Been doing this for years. Great service. Are y'all from the Dad Jokes sub?
Puns are the purest form of sassery.
The puns are the reasons I love Reddit. He just took a little needling to understand where she was coming from.
I guess he finally got the point.
That was a dope move. My coworker every so often would need to inject insulin because his pump wasn't working. I can only imagine how many times in his life he's had to just carry his needles around with him until he got home because there weren't any Sharps containers in public places. People that aren't drug users need Sharps containers too.